Hello, so welcome back to my channel. We are going to discuss the books that I read in February. So I already covered the Mindfuck series, all 5 books I talked about in their own video, and I read that like the first week of February. And then I also read Things We Never Got Over. I really wanted to like this book because you know when you just see a book cover and you think about it for like several weeks before you get it, so it's just like you have this desire to want to like it. I don't know, just something about it. There was just something, it had something. But when I opened the book, I felt like I was like, what in the Jerry Springer? I'm just really tired of these southern trope small town dynamics. I don't know, I just want something a little bit more fast-paced lately. I feel like a lot of southern tropes get recommended, and like, not knocking people who like that stuff, but me personally, I want something different. Good. Yeah, so I rated Things We Never Got Over 1 star, and then I can't tell you what it's about because I DNF'd most of it and I skimmed most of it, but all I know is that there is a girl who goes to a small town and has some kind of trouble with her twin who no one knows where they are, and then her and this guy are just like in some kind of forced proximity trope. I don't know, but I just boring. I don't know. And then the next book is Good Girl Complex, the Avalon Bay series by Elle Kennedy, and I really liked this. I gave it 3 stars, which in retrospect, like I should have given it 4 stars at least because it wasn't that bad. But I think I know why I gave it 3 stars. I have this issue lately where like the couple, like most, like half of the book is the back and forth on if they're gonna get together or not, and then by the time they do, it's like this weird kind of instant love where the guy gets super sappy and then the plot kind of gets lost, and like, I don't know, I just feel like it gets too mushy-gushy but not enough relatability around it, I guess. So that's probably why I gave it 3 stars. However, it was a really good read. I enjoyed it from start to finish. It is about this girl who's basically being cheated on by her boyfriend, and this guy who is like dared by his friends to kind of pursue like the rich girl. And it's kind of, this book actually really gives me Outer Banks vibes. So like if you like the show Outer Banks, you might really like this book because it's like rich girl and then guy who's like poor neighborhood of the town, a small beach town. They like have like kind of like a rivalry like against both friend groups, I guess, or dynamics. And she's basically like that girl from Outer Banks. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, so if you know, you know. And then Maggie Moves On by Lucy Score. I rated it 1 star. It was just really boring. I did skim through it and read more of it than I would give credit to reading the Things We Never Got Over book, but basically it's this girl. She is like a YouTuber of fixer-up like house HGTV kind of stuff, so if you like that kind of stuff you would probably really like this book. It didn't work for me because the guy in the book was just very, I don't know, just sappy, and she was like too moody, like almost like teenage whiny moody, and no, I just didn't really like their dynamic. I think that also if I had like less ADD I could have probably appreciated it more, but yeah. Okay, so the next book was a 5-star read, and I read this book towards the end of February, and it's the Davenports, and it's going to be a series, and I'm so excited. It's basically like if you've watched Gossip Girl, but it's the perspective of 4 different women who are all black in the 1920s, and the experience of the 1920s American experience under the lens of black women. However, I think 3 of them are like very, very rich in that time period, and this is all based on like real history. This is about a family who was very popular for manufacturing carriages, and like their family has a lot of money in a time where it's like right before the Jim Crow era, I believe, was like happening, because there's a lot of talk in the book about the potential of the town being segregated. I believe it's based in Chicago, but it was just from start to finish, it's very glitzy, very glamorous, lots of romance, which I ate up, and every perspective, like I genuinely, like usually when there's so many POVs I get bored and I don't care, but like usually I have like one main favorite and then I skim the rest, but like this one I was genuinely reading every single POV. I really liked every perspective. There were so many different things going on, and there was so much romance going on, and it was just very like Bridgerton and Prejudice, Gossip Girl, and all like all black female heroines, and I just really like that. I really appreciate that, because yeah, there just needs to be more representation, and I really enjoyed it, and I cannot wait for the second one. So you need to read that. And then I read Stone Blind. Wait, I was a Medusa retelling, and it was so good. Basically, you know, everyone knows the story of Medusa. It's very sad, but just it was written so beautifully. You know who the author reminds me of? The author is Natalie Haynes, but it reminds me of that book Strange the Dreamer by Bonnie Taylor. It literally has that same vibe, very like whimsical, almost like Caraval-esque. Very, very devastating story, but I love Medusa. I love Medusa stories and what she represents, and so I just ate that up. A 5-star read. So I think those were my 2 5-star reads in February. Yeah, that's all. I read 1,000 Miles by Bridget Morrissey wrote afterwards. It's like this kind of, it's kind of like People We Meet on Vacation, which I also didn't like, the foreshadowing. And it's like these 2 people who meet up after like 10 years of not speaking with one another, and basically the guy has like some kind of history of flaking out on her or like skipping out on her. People haven't talked to him forever, and then they finally meet back up, and the guy, I think, ghosted his friend 10 years ago. They had some kind of high school romance or something like that, and then he shows up at her doorstep because they had made a promise that they were going to go on this road trip 10 years from now, and then 10 years rolls around, and so he's like, hey, we're going on the road trip, and she's like, what? Excuse me? I haven't heard from you in forever. So then they go on this road trip, and long story short, they rekindle their connection. I think my biggest thing about this book that I was really bored about was just something about second chance romance, that it can sometimes feel like you don't have a lot of mystery or intrigue, and a lot of the build up around romance novels for me that I like is like the back and forth of if they both like each other or not, and if both characters feel like the other person likes them, and that part's just really fun for me. And this one just felt super like insta love. You know, you don't talk for 10 years, but all of a sudden, like, the other person is someone you're madly in love with, and it just didn't feel authentic. So that's kind of why I lost interest or DNF'd it, but it was mainly for those reasons. And then I read Love in the Time of Serial Killers, and I was so excited to read this book. I bought the physical copy, which I usually don't buy physical copies of a book I haven't read already because I don't trust I'm gonna like it. And then long story short, I didn't like it. It was very boring, and the entire premise of this book is this girl who's just neurotic and keeping to herself and thinks everyone around her is a serial killer, but she has a crush on her neighbor, a very standard normal neighbor, and she's just having these internal dialogues, and a lot of it is just conversation. Like, I feel like the book itself, if you were to ask me like what events took place in the book, in my opinion, it's just like girl randomly bumping into this guy, and it's like either self-deprecating internal dialogue or like them randomly having like very nuanced and nonsensical conversation that ultimately led nowhere. And so that's why I was just like, what do I do with this? And then the best book, although it technically counts as a March read because I read it this week, it's now March 9th, but this is the best book of all time. In terms of like romance risque novel, like this is the best book. Called The Right Move, and ironically enough, this is not the first book in the series. I'm just crazy and I read the second book of the series, but like it's more of those standalone novels that can go together but they don't need to. So it's by Liz Tomford, and it's about this, I just read it so it's fresh in my brain. This guy Ryan Shea is a very famous basketball player, and he meets Indy, short for Indigo. And basically, long story short, he has this sister. He's very overprotective and he keeps to himself. He's like the #1 basketball player of his decade. So he's like think Kobe of like the 2020s, I guess. Who is that, like Steph Curry? I don't know. So anyways, so with that being said, he keeps to himself. He lives a like very low-key life apart from being like world famous basketball player, and his little sister has this friend who just got over like this intense heartbreak. I guess the 6-year-long boyfriend cheated on her, and so she needed to move out. Long story short, the sister of Ryan Shea is like, what's her name? I forgot. Well, but she's like, hey, can my friend live with you temporarily until she gets on her feet? And he's like this very controlled, reserved, shy, like to himself kind of guy. And the girl that moves in is Indy, and she is like, she loves reading romance novels. She's very messy. He's very clean. She is just very happy-go-lucky. He's kind of grumpy. But ultimately, like, they end up catching feelings. And I'm gonna tell you the best quote of any book I've ever heard. Granted, if you're a romance novel junkie like me, like this is going to be the best quote you've ever heard. If not, then this will not mean anything to you. This is a quote, a direct quote from this book, The Right Move, and it just sums up how perfect this book is, if that makes sense. Anyways, towards the end of the book, after some things have happened, I'm not going to spoil it for you. This is said by Ryan Shea to Indy, and he says, I love that you read romance novels to feel something. I'm sorry. I love that you read romance novels to feel something. Like, he is like ultimately the best book boyfriend, and this book is really great because it talks a lot about quiet love and not so much about showy, over the top, do it for the gram kind of love. And I really appreciate that because we're in a society where we are so consumed by like everything needing to be for show, everything needing to be online, everything needing to be public news. And I think that this book is just a really precious way to like remind people that subtle gestures and being thoughtful doesn't always need to be loud, and being loud doesn't always mean that someone is like being or showing love. So I just really love this book. It has a really great message behind it. It also talks about men's mental health, which in society I don't feel like we talk enough about. We don't shed light on it, and I think it's very important. And yeah, this is just the creme de la creme of romance novels. And like, this isn't just the best book so far of 2023. This is the best book for romance novel wise of all time. It's like more of a smutty kind of romance novel, so don't read it if you don't want that. But yeah. Overall, that completes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and all my social media links are down below, and I'll see you in my next video.